Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. It's Ukraine War News Update, third part for the 29th of April 2024. This is a geopolitical news update for the Ukraine War. We'll start with good news that the Polish blockade has been lifted along the entire Polish-Ukrainian border, according to Ukrainian border guards, after Polish protesters lifted their blockade at the Srebrena-Rawa-Ruska crossing with Ukraine. The blockade along the entire Polish-Ukrainian border ended. That's excellent news. This has been really harming the Ukrainian economy, trade going both ways, and also actually possibly stuff coming in, military equipment coming in. There have been various claims that there has been delays, and then counterclaims that actually there haven't been delays to military equipment, but I have seen images of trucks with military equipment stuck on the side of the road, so there is at least some evidence to suggest that's been the case. But yeah, that's really good news if that has been solved. Let's hope that's a long-lasting solution there. Now, Dmytro Kuleba, the foreign minister, was speaking with Christian Amanpour. We'll see what he has to say on CNN here.
We will keep fighting. What we do need is our partners to firmly believe that Ukraine's victory is attainable, and second, to have no fear towards Putin, because Putin is a political animal who can sense fear, and when he does, he becomes more aggressive. If he sees the strengths, if he senses the strengths, as it was recently demonstrated by the Congress, he will be forced to step back.
And I think that's true. A lot of people have said this. Analysts have often said that Putin actually doesn't do very well against strength. He takes advantage when people are weak. And this is why there is a lot of criticism against people like Jake Sullivan, who are the kind of de-escalation thinkers in the Biden administration, that actually that's the wrong way to go with Putin. He will step back if you show strength to him. Half of the German tanks, so moving on now to Sikorski, the foreign minister of Poland, said half the German tanks that invaded Poland in 1939 were actually Czech tanks. So if Putin conquers Ukraine, he'll be more powerful, and a challenge for us would be bigger. Now, what he's talking about is the idea that as the Ukrainian army cedes territory, in fact, there's something's just come out about this, that they are picking up men who are, in fact, I will find that for you, because actually this talks exactly to that. I've copied that for tomorrow, but this is so relevant. Right, so here we go. As Russians are allowed to advance, they continue mobilizing any surviving local men to absorb Ukrainian ammo. And this is a translation from the Russian governor. So they do conscript Ukrainian troops, and there's this problem with Ukrainian soldiers or Ukrainian men being mobilized into the Russian forces to then fire against Ukrainian men, arguably against their will. And so the idea for Poland is that, yeah, you say that Russia won't be able to have the manpower themselves to attack Poland after Ukraine, but what they'll be doing as they move through Ukraine, if they are indeed able to do so, is they'll be picking up Ukrainian equipment and personnel to fight that war for them. And at the beginning of World War II, 1939, when Poland was invaded, half the tanks were Czech tanks, and not actually German tanks. And so, you know, there's a history to be learnt from, and yeah, interesting. Wall Street Journal reports that Germany opposes seizing Russian assets, fearing World War II era reparations. The US and UK argue that commandeering $300 billion in frozen Russian funds is vital for Ukraine's victory, but reservations from Europe and Japan threaten the initiative. And this is due to there being legal ramifications for doing so, potentially. So it needs to be absolutely legally watertight, but also there are fears about unsettling the markets, and this having adverse effect on security for financial transactions going forward in other contexts, and if you're afraid that these things can be confiscated, and so on and so forth. There are lots of financial economic arguments there that I don't fully understand, or at least I haven't fully looked into, and that's what's keeping people back from seizing. I mean, in principle it sounds really obvious. That's Russian stuff, just seize it and there you go, we got some money for Ukraine. But actually there are loads of issues with doing that aren't immediately obvious. And I guess for the US, it's quite easy to say that Europe should use all those frozen assets in that way, because all the assets are in Europe, pretty much. There's only $3 billion worth in the US. So the ramifications for the US are minimal, but the ramifications for Europe are far greater. So it's probably easy for the US to advocate for that. We heard that from Republicans saying, yep, we should do the Repo Act, let's do that. Well, yeah, but it doesn't really affect you that much. You've only got $3 billion worth, and yeah. So, but if it can get sorted out legally and economically, then goodness me, it has to be done. An Italian minister said Italy has no reason to oppose new EU sanctions against Russian gas. Italy has overcome its dependence on Russian gas and will not oppose a proposed package of EU sanctions on liquefied natural gas, LNG, Italian Energy Minister Gilberto Pichetto Fratin said, as reported by Politico yesterday. Now, in light of that, with the LNG talk, Financial Times reports today that Turkey is in talks with ExxonMobil to secure an LNG deal aiming to reduce reliance on Russian natural gas. So this is Turkey, a big supporter of Russia. They're a big supporter of Ukraine as well. They straddle that fence. Turkey is in talks with the US-based ExxonMobil to secure a long-term liquefied natural gas deal worth billions of dollars, aiming to diversify its energy sources. Turkish Energy Minister Alparslan Bayraktar, he told the Financial Times. I wonder if that's the same family as Bayraktar, who's a son-in-law of Erdogan, who runs the Bayraktar drone, Baykar drone company, or Bayrak, or whatever it is. Anyway, this chap has told the Financial Times on the 28th that the potential agreement could provide up to 2.5 million tonnes of LNG annually for 10 years. Next, the reports it as this: Turkey will refuse Russian gas in favour of American LNG, while Putin does not give up on hopes of organising a gas hub in Turkey. Ankara has decided to move in the opposite direction to reduce dependence on Russian energy resources. To replace Russian gas, Turkey is supposed to buy huge volumes from a country unfriendly to Russia, with which Turkey is restoring relations after they had been deteriorating for several years. Turkey intends to build a portfolio of new supplies to reduce dependence on any supplier. Energy Minister Alparslan Bayraktar told the Financial Times. Interesting. Now, I think this is highly controversial, but I'm not sure what can be done about it other than kind of outright war. Russian GPS jamming in and around Estonia is having an increasing impact. For 2 days in a row, planes have been unable to land at the second biggest city in Estonia due to GPS jamming. It's pretty disturbing, says Eric Kanika here. If we go to another source, Jochen Kleinschmidt, he says if the Baltic jammer in Kaliningrad prevents transportation from and to European destinations, it's time for European countries to block transportation from and to Kaliningrad. Not reacting forcefully here will just lead to more provocations elsewhere. So that is certainly one thing that can be done, and I think should be done, is if you're going to block us from being able to outside of your own airspace, Kaliningrad, and indeed maybe with shipping as well. If you are GPS blocking us from being able to do whatever we want to do in our own airspaces and land spaces and waters, then you will not have any access from Russia through other countries to you. So the trains that go through that gap to Kaliningrad will be cut off. But other than that, it's like if you keep doing that, well, I don't know what you do, short of invading Kaliningrad to stop them doing that. Maybe you can put just a complete embargo on Kaliningrad, so if it's not self-sufficient on food, if it's completely blocked, then you're starving it, and then saying, we will do that until you stop jamming. I think that would have to be done. Right. there was that law that was passed on first reading, but it has to go through another 2 readings, I think. The Foreign Agents Law, which is actually just a pro-autocracy law. Jane Kiev here saying, hopefully Hungarians and Slovakians are watching Georgia tonight. This is because there have been these huge gatherings in Georgia. So tens of thousands of people coming out, pro-EU, pro-democracy marches. People in Tbilisi, says Jay and Kiev again, proving once again that it's always been just to keep the Russians out in the first place, then trying to get rid of them later. It's always better doing that. Georgians protesting Russians that have seized control of the government. US and EU should learn from this, he says. So whether they will be able to do something on par with the Euromaidan protests, I don't know. But you see there's pro-Ukrainian sentiment there, one of the many Ukrainian flags at the anti-Russian demonstrations in Georgian capital Tbilisi. And then you see some pretty incredible footage here. Tens of thousands of Georgian pro-EU protesters are heading toward the parliament in Tbilisi to protest the foreign agents law there. We'll just give that... quite a lot of footage to show a lot of people there over quite a long stretch. Is that enough? Will that make a difference? Will the government be able to outlast the protesters? I don't know. I just hope that Georgia moves in the right direction rather than where they're going at the moment, which is presently in the wrong direction. Right, Ivana Stradner has been particularly worried. She's an expert on the Balkans, which is particularly Serbia, but Serbia, Albania, Montenegro, Kosovo, and then of course you've got Hungary next door, etc., Croatia. Here, but Bosnia-Herzegovina or Herzegovina, who knows? Someone does. Politico reports Coca-Cola, L'Oreal, other big brands have been told by members of the European Parliament to stop advertising that is fueling Russian disinformation in the Balkans. So global companies get heat for financing pro-Kremlin media in Serbia and Bulgaria with their advertising budgets. So interesting angle to take there. Ivana Stradner's particularly worried about Serbia at the moment, and this is why. So Xi Jinping is going to Vučić, the Serbian president, to invite Serbia to join BRICS. That's Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And we keep hearing about these other nations like Sri Lanka, potentially Saudi Arabia, these other nations that are going to become sort of members. Serbia is being courted by China here and Russia. Ivana Stradner says, "Dear EU, who cares? Let him go. Vučić needs you more than you need him. This is just his latest blackmail. First with Russia, now with China. Invest in other countries in the region, impose visas, and isolate Vučić and his regime." I think that's a good option. I am worried about... But BRICS worries me, but it does. I sometimes get criticism by a lot of people who say BRICS is not going anywhere. They're not going to produce an alternative currency to the dollar that's going to actually get any traction. And I completely agree with that. Where BRICS worries me is the soft power. It's actually just people getting together to say those guys over there suck, and then they form a kind of information space, an ecosystem that is challenging to Western ideals, and especially if autocracy is involved there. So it's like an autocracy party that they're having. That's what worries me about BRICS. It's not so much the hard power, because actually some of these guys don't get on particularly well. Russia and China aren't actually that friendly outside of marriage of convenience. India and China equally don't particularly get on. So this is an uneasy relationship, but it is a kind of, it's a soft power alternative get together that worries me. Okay. The Financial Times reports the largest Western banks that remain in Russia have paid the Kremlin more than 800 million euros in taxes last year. So the top 7 European banks by assets in Russia are the Raiffeisen Bank, which is Raiffeisen Bank International. That's the one from Austria, has been under a lot of pressure, but then banks in Austria and Hungary that do a lot of dealings in Russia get put on the blacklist, and then Austria and Hungary say, well, if you don't take them off the blacklist, then we'll veto any aid going from the EU to Ukraine. So these banks are becoming political footballs between the competing nations, either between nations within the EU, but also between Russia and Russia's influence within the EU on the EU. So the top 7 European banks are number 1, Raiffeisen Bank International, UniCredit, ING, Commerzbank, Deutsche Bank, and Intesa San Paolo, and OTP. OTP is the one from Hungary that is being used as leverage by Viktor Orban there. Okay, Russia steals grain, continues to do this. This happens all the time. But just to say what Exit says here, Exit often appears with Andrew Perpetua, due to come on my show again at some point. Anyway, Russia steals grain from Ukraine with ships that should not be allowed to sail in any country's waters. Referring to the claim here, pirates of the Black Sea, flagless cargo vessels San Damian and San Severus sailed through Bosphorus en route to occupy Crimea several weeks after the Kingdom of Eswatini deregistered them. Both vessels with fake insurance are long-time transporters of stolen Ukrainian commodities. Something needs to happen there. These are where the sanctions the loopholes need to be closed, and sanctions need to be strongly, robustly upheld. Reuters reports that Chinese companies are going underground in order to pay Russia. Major Chinese banks are limiting payments for transactions with Russia, so that's in line with the pressure put on them by the US as they fear US sanctions. According to Reuters today, citing undisclosed trading and banking sources. Quote, transactions between China and Russia will increasingly go through underground channels, but these methods carry significant risks, said the head of the trade body in a southeastern province that represents Chinese businesses and Russian interests. So it's good that the US are putting pressure and it's on the Chinese banks, and it's good that the behavior has changed. It's a shame that there are ways around it, but those ways around the situation do present risks. Now, talking about this 4D game of chess that we are seeing playing out in front of us, where China and Russia are vying for influence around the world against Western interests, authoritarian regimes are locking Westerners out of their countries on their acquisition list. So the British MP has been deported from Djibouti for, quote, lies and disinformation about China. So whether it's lies and disinformation or whether it's truth and accuracy, I don't know. I don't know what the details are, but you can see that, you've got the British there trying to say to Djibouti, hey, guys, watch out for China, they suck. And then Djibouti go, yeah, but China have just paid us way more than you've offered, so see ya. And kick out the British MP because they favour China. And again, this is, BRICS, or at least China, having success in their influence campaigns around the world, over and above Western entities. And here, Kiev Independent, quoting from Carl Bildt, the former Swedish Prime Minister, quote, not only are Russia's ammunition factories humming along, but Donald Trump stands a good chance of returning to the White House early next year. A Russian victory of sorts seemed within reach. So he is another one that's worrying about a Trump presidency and the effect that will have on global geopolitics and really exactly what Putin would want. So my warning again to anyone who's thinking of voting for Trump out there, don't do it. Certainly for international geopolitical reasons. My goodness. And another, talking about someone who favours Russia and is, oh goodness me, disinformation. He's a disinformation tsar, this guy. David Sacks. So he's Elon Musk's best mate who just gets to splurge disinformation across the internet. Patrick Fox having enough of David Sacks here, Patrick Fox is a US Air Force veteran, University College London alumnus, UCL, foreign policy and military analyst. He says, I swear no one reads history anymore. The most egregious ahistorical hot take I've seen this weekend. And it comes from David Sachs. David Sachs saying, Vietnam, Iraq, Ukraine, easily avoidable wars entered into under false pretenses. Will we ever learn, or does every generation need one? You absolute grade A plonker. Wanted to swear so much there. David Sachs, I'll tell you how it was easily avoidable, mate, and it ain't nothing to do with us, because at the end of the day, it's Ukraine fighting against an invasion. So I'll tell you how it was easily avoidable, and it's pretty bloody obvious, mate. It is Putin not invading with his imperialistic, narcissistic, rose-tinted glasses and ambitions with his imperialistic army. That's how that war would have been easily avoided. Don't give the order, Putin. But no, you have to look and blame someone else, anyone else but Putin and the aggressive invader. You are a bad, bad, bad human being, David Sachs. You are a morally corrupt individual. Sort yourself out. Just jog on. Go and live. I'll tell you what, you love it so much, apparently, it appears. At least you want to criticise everyone else, the US, Ukraine. Go and live in Russia, mate. Take your stuff, sod off to Moscow. That's my advice. In the meantime, take care, everybody. Speak soon. And drop into the live very soon with Colby Badwa.